Well, the season finale of Loki is behind us, and I have all of my recaps and thoughts for season 1 right. Huh! Hello everybody and welcome to, let's call it my recap and review of episode 6 of season 1 of Loki. The episode is called For All Time Always, which is the slogan of the TVA, and as always, this will be a spoiler review. So if you haven't seen the season finale of Loki, it's not too late. You can go watch it right now. Come back and see what my thoughts on the episode were. I'll give you just a second. Well, you know what? Actually, just pause it. There you go. There's a lot to break down and get into. I have some very complicated thoughts about this episode, so let's start at the beginning with the Marvel logo, something that I mentioned in my review. It was really just kind of a throwaway joke a couple weeks ago, but a lot of people fixated on it. I talked about sitting through the Marvel logo every single week. Well, last week they added the skip intro button, and this week they added this montage of clips of different Marvel movies, all of our different characters that we know, with the music from the end of Avengers Endgame. It's trying to get you wistful right away. I thought that this was very effective. And hey, the logo flew by, so I don't know if somebody's listening over there, but I will say the last 2 weeks, the Marvel logo quote-unquote problem, and it wasn't even a problem, has not existed. Then we keep the montage going with an audio-visual trip through space and time. We hear the voices of famous historical figures, current historical figures. We hear the voice of the Vision saying the best line from WandaVision, what is grief if not love persevering? This was a really effective way to open the show, but I'm just going to keep it real. This was taken from Contact, the 1997 Jodie Foster movie that was directed by Robert Zemeckis. Maybe it was an homage to Contact, but Contact definitely did it. They both even used the same Neil Armstrong One Small Step for Man clip.
Robert Kennedy was shot.
We find Loki and Sylvie pretty much exactly where we left them at the end of last week's episode, at the gates of this castle/fortress that they found at the end of time. This is the culmination of Sylvie's quest, what she's been working toward for her entire life on the run from the TVA. So this is a big deal for her. Sylvie and Loki walk in and are creeping around, and then we get a Miss Minutes out of nowhere. And I have to say, maybe this was just to jolt people awake, keep that adrenaline going, as if our adrenaline wasn't already going with the season finale. Thanks for the jump scare, Marvel. Really don't expect them out of many Marvel movies, but I have to say something about Miss Minutes because, last week I stood up for Miss Minutes. As a matter of fact, I scolded Ravona Renslayer for bringing Miss Minutes into her plots and plans, even though Miss Minutes was the one that seemed to suggest this stalling tactic. And yet it seems like Miss Minutes was playing us all, perhaps me most of all, the entire time, because she apparently works for the Lord of the Manor, the King of the Castle. She says that they are in the lair of He Who Remains, the person who is the creator of all things, who controls all. This was an inside job by Miss Minutes. She was the inside person all along, and a lot of people were telling me that, and I just had such faith. I had such faith that Miss Minutes was an innocent pawn in everything that was going on. Shame on you, Miss Minutes, but then again, maybe shame on me for believing in you. Miss Minutes offers Loki and Sylvie a deal to get them to turn around and not go further into the castle of He Who Remains. She says that she can put both of them into the sacred timeline together, and she can give them what they want. She can give Loki a victory in the Battle of New York, but not just a victory there. She could give him the Infinity Gauntlet. She can give him a victory over Thanos. He could kill Thanos. She can give him the throne of Asgard. Basically, I guess the timeline is sacred, but you can kind of fudge a few details here and there. She also offers Sylvie the opportunity to wake up and have a lifetime of happy memories, to essentially forget about the fact that she spent her entire life exiled and on the run, and she and Loki can enjoy a life together. They turn this offer down. They say, you know what, we write our own destiny. And then Miss Minutes gives them the old Morgan Freeman / Lucius Fox, well, good luck with that, and off she goes. We then see her briefly once more in Ravona's office, where she gives her some files that were sent from He Who Remains. And you know what, let's just drop the pretense. It's you and me here. We've been doing these reviews for 6 weeks now. Can we just call him Kang? And I know that this is not the version of Kang the Conqueror that we're going to see. This is like a proto-Kang, the nice version of Kang. But just so I don't have to keep saying He Who Remains, I'm gonna call the guy Kang. And this is a case where the real world kind of intruded on the storytelling possibilities, because I've said many times that I don't seek out inside information. I don't seek out every little casting rumor or thing about where a show might be be going, but there are some things that are unavoidable. And one thing that was unavoidable last year, it was splashed over every industry site, movie news Twitter account, you name it. Anyone that ever talked about the MCU had said last year that Jonathan Majors had been cast in the MCU and that he was going to be playing Kang, as if that was the news that had been announced from Marvel, even though it wasn't. And so when he showed up, I immediately just went, oh, it's Kang. And that was a theory that a lot of people had about who might be in this lair, who might be behind the TVA. But then the show proceeded as if we didn't know it was Kang. And I understand that. You can't write the show based on what people who may or may not follow movie news may or may not know. But I think that might be one of the reasons why I was a little underwhelmed by this episode. It was because it extended this mystery of who this character was when I knew that it was Kang, because I knew that Jonathan Majors was playing Kang in the MCU. Also, I thought it was kind of funny that one of his first lines was, "Don't tell me I'm a disappointment." That felt a little bit meta for the people watching at home that might have been, as we say, disappointed that the person behind the TVA either was or wasn't the person that they did or didn't expect it to be. I was really looking forward after last week's episode to what was going to happen with Mobius at the TVA as he went back to, as he said, burn the place down. There actually wasn't a whole lot that happens at the TVA. Ravona talked to Miss Minutes, and then we had a couple scenes with Mobius and Ravona where he confronts her about her betrayal and sending him to the void. And the biggest thing of consequence that happened was we bring back this Franklin Roosevelt High School pen that we had highlighted even on this show way back in episode 2. It was the origin of where Ravona came from. B-15 was sent back to that origin spot 2018 in Fremont, Ohio, to the school where Ravona taught. We see a diploma on the wall under the name Rebecca Tourmanet, which in my Googling after the show says that this was an alias that the comics version of Ravona Renslayer had used before. And this was basically a recruitment tool from B-15 to take TVA agents out into the real world to show them their judge and basically say, see, she doesn't know who Ravona Renslayer is. She doesn't know who the TVA is. This is proof that we're all variants, and basically to help spread the word and get the gospel out about what is actually happening. Then the confrontation between Mobius and Ravona ends. There's a very brief physical battle. I thought that Mobius was kind of pulling a Loki, like he maybe, grabbed her temp pad or something from her, that he'd kind of figured out some of these tricks of the trade, but it turns out that he's maybe just not a great hand-to-hand combat guy, and Ravona leaves. She goes through a time door. She says she's going in search of free will, and that's the last time we see her really in the episode. So a big to be continued on what's going on with Ravona Renslayer. What is it that Miss Minutes showed her? What were those documents? We'll find out in season 2 of Loki. Then we go back to the end of time, or whatever you want to call it, and we have this series of scenes, very expository scenes, dare I say, better than, but somewhat reminiscent of the Architect Neo scenes from The Matrix Reloaded, where we basically have the characters walk into this room and just get a big download on everything that's been going on. We have Protokang / Kang talking about what's been going on, the fact that he has led Loki and Sylvie to his door every step of the way. He knows everything that's going on. He knows everything that will go on. And this was all part of the plan. They were supposed to make their way to him for a very important reason. I have to say, I think that Jonathan Majors is a great actor. I have really enjoyed him in everything that I've seen him in, and I've seen him in several movies now at this point. But when we talk about my thoughts on this episode, again, another reason why I kind of left a little bit underwhelmed was that I just wasn't digging his take, honestly, on this version of Kang. This good Kang, the original Kang, whatever you want to call him. It just wasn't quite hitting on all cylinders for me. I'm not going to draw any judgments to how he's going to play Kang the Conqueror or the evil versions of Kang or whatever we're going to see down the road, because I'm sure those are going to be completely different performance styles, a completely different take on the character, because they're different variants of the character. When you confine it to this one episode, however, we've had actors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that have been over the top, that have had these very big, broad performances, and they've been great. Andy Serkis in Black Panther is one example of that. His Ulysses Klaue is so over the top in that movie, and yet it fits. Here, it just didn't fit for me, and I wonder if it's because Jonathan Majors was maybe cast because he plays the different versions of Kang maybe a little bit better than he played this version of Kang, but it was over the top, but it seemed over the top in a way that seemed to be trying too hard or maybe out of sync with what was going on. I couldn't really put my finger on it. I just wasn't invested in the character that was being played. I thought, oh, oh, Jonathan Majors is having a big time acting. It didn't seem like the character doing this, it seemed like the actor doing this. And I know it seems like a very strange distinction, but when so much of the episode rests on his shoulders, then I am going to analyze that performance, and something just wasn't quite clicking for me. So add that to the pile of why I walked out of Loki episode 6 a little disappointed in what I got. So from here we get to the heart of the matter of what is actually going on, and we get the origin story of not only this version of Kang, but the other versions of Kang the Conqueror that we're going to meet down the road here in the MCU. He was a scientist in 31st century Earth. He essentially discovered the multiverse and used it as a tool of cooperation. There were very friendly versions of him that showed up, but then some not so friendly versions of him showed up, and it turned out that there was a multiversal war with each part of the multiverse looking to annihilate the other parts of the multiverse and make sure that the one that they lived in was the one that survived. So the version of Kang that discovered the multiverse, at least in this version of the story, we may be looking at an unreliable narrator here, found and tamed Alioth, the beast that we saw, that was a creation of all of these realities colliding, and was able to end the multiversal war by starting the TVA, by pruning away the timelines and keeping one sacred timeline. Because otherwise, the universe is going to descend into chaos. He knows what's going to happen. If the TVA ever stops doing their job, then the timelines will start to splinter again. The Kangs will all start coming out of their respective timelines, and they're going to be looking to destroy all of the other ones. So Loki and Silvia are presented with a choice. They can kill the Kang that's in front of them and allow the universe to descend into chaos, or they can run the TVA, as Kang describes them, as benevolent rulers, to basically come in, say that they're all variants, explain what the mission is, run it a little more on the up and up. And this is where Loki and Sylvie have a difference of opinion. Loki is hedging on the side of taking over the TVA. He says, listen, this kind of sucks and I don't want to do it either, but if you remove the dictator, what fills the void? Sylvie, on the other hand, isn't having any of this. She's been on the run from the TVA. She had her life destroyed by it. She sees it as an absolute evil. And now she thinks that Loki wants to rule the TVA because he wants the throne. He just wants to rule the universe. It's a very Loki thing, to be fair. I don't blame her necessarily for thinking that might be what Loki's motivation is, although it's a little bit cold-hearted considering everything that they've gone through together. So then we have a Loki fight, clashing swords and clashing magics, all kinds of things that you would expect when Lokis get together and have a throwdown. And it culminates in Loki stepping in front of Sylvie's blade and saying, listen, I've been where you are. I felt how you felt. This is not about the throne. I just want you to be okay. And then we get what many fans have been wanting for the entire series, or at least since they introduced Sylvie, the Loki-Sylvie kiss. Now, as I said last week, I am not a Loki-Sylvie shipper. I just think it's kind of weird. So I wasn't overly energized by this moment, but apparently neither was Sylvie, because it seems like she's into it. Then she says, well, you know what? I'm not you. She pushes Loki through a temporal door that she's opened using Kang's little arm wristband thingy, and then she kills the Kang who's been running the TVA, essentially dooming the universe to descend into, dare I say it, a multiverse of madness. Protokang departs this universe with some menacing final words, I'll see you soon, and then we catch up with Loki, who is back at the TVA and goes to warn B-15 and Mobius about what's just happened. He finds them in the library and he says, you're never going to believe this, we found him, they're coming, there's countless versions of a very dangerous person and they're all set on war. And this was actually a really good performance from Owen Wilson, because at first you think he's trying to give him a pep talk. He's saying, you're an analyst, right? Who are you? Like he's trying to have Loki try to start thinking his way out of the situation. But then you realize that Mobius is actually asking him, no, really, who are you? You're an analyst? And it's revealed that we now have a Loki who's in a reality at the TVA with a Mobius and B-15 who have no memory of who he is. And then we get a bit of a Tim Burton Planet of the Apes ending where we pan over to the statue, and instead of the Timekeepers, the statue is now of Kang. Is this Kang the Conqueror? I don't know. We'll see. It's definitely a Kang or a version of Kang. And I know that saying that every Kang is a Kang might be a little derivative, but at this point, I really don't know what to call them. I'm sure that we're going to learn more and more as we go. And that's where we end the show. We don't really resolve anything. We just open a bunch of new doors without closing a lot of the ones behind us. And the mid-credit sting even really doesn't give us any new information other than that Loki will return in season 2. So we have the confirmation of season 2, the official confirmation that this storyline is going to continue. And that's it. That's how we wrap up season 1 of Loki. Looking at this first season, and not just this episode, but the season in general, this is where it gets tough when you talk about realistic expectations and then just preferences, what I like from a show, because I loved the first episodes of this season, and one of the reasons that I loved it is I liked the story that they were telling, not the story that they were setting up, but the story that they were telling, the character development and the growth that we'd seen of the Lokis, the relationship between Loki and Sylvie and how we tracked it from episode to episode. I really liked where all of that was going, and I liked that we were building to this culminating event, and I was going to see where everything that had happened this season, what was the impact that it was going to have on these characters, and then obviously there are consequences in every Marvel movie from the things that happen in them. But the difference, I think, between this season of Loki and a lot of the other Marvel movies is when you go to the MCU proper, just the movies, they've always been, or almost always been, part of a superseding narrative. Every Marvel movie fits into an overarching narrative, but they've also been, by and large, complete stories unto themselves. Each movie has an opening and a closing arc. It has a story that they tell from beginning to end, and then you zoom out and see where it fits into the sequence of events that we're building up. So did I expect Loki to completely resolve all of its storylines in this season? Not necessarily, because I expected, or I heavily suspected, that there was going to be a season 2, or that you were going to continue the storyline of the show in some way. But I guess I was hoping that it would close off some of those loops that it had opened, and that there would be more resolution to some of the storylines that they had started this season. Now, a lot of people would say, like, well, that's just a TV show. Well, I understand that, but this is what I mean when I talk about expectations versus preferences. We are only on our third one of these MCU shows, and I still don't know what to expect from them. And if you go back to my reviews for WandaVision, if you go back to my review of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when we've gotten to the end of each one of those shows, generally, I always kind of have some things that I like about the finales, but I think I've said in every one of them, well, I think it's just that I don't know what to expect from these shows yet. And this is sort of how I feel with Loki, although I think I'm now understanding more and more what it's going to be. It's just that I don't necessarily like it, because Loki is really more of a bridge than a show unto itself. There have been some very interesting things that were set up, and some great characters and some great moments, and some things that did start from beginning to end. But it seems like the main function of at least season 1 of this show was to get us to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and everything that's going to be happening in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and all of these other Marvel movies that are going to be happening down the line. And there's a reason why I'm kind of lower on movies like Age of Ultron than a lot of other people, which is that I'm not a big fan of the bridge movies or the bridge stories, the ones that only seem to exist to connect pieces of the story and yet struggle with their own independent storytelling. And I have to be honest, when we got to the end of this episode and I understood that the primary function of season 1 of Loki seemed to be bridging the gap between these different movies, I was disappointed. It even comes down to the mid-credits scene where I was hoping, like, well, maybe we're going to get a tidbit about this character or that character, or maybe even what's going to happen next season. And then it's literally just a stamp that says Loki will return in season 2. I had some Ralphie and Christmas Story vibes. I felt like I'd been in the bathroom, I'd gotten my Ovaltine decoder ring, and it was a commercial.
A crummy commercial? Son of a bitch.
Coming into this episode of Loki, I love the character growth and development. I loved the overall story for what they've done so far through the first 5 episodes, more than I'd loved anything that they'd done story-wise in the first season of WandaVision or the first season of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. After this episode, after episode 6, when I look at the overall story, I actually think it's kind of the weakest of the 3, which is a disappointment to me, only because I loved so much about what had come in the first 5 episodes. I now think, looking back, that WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier are both more complete narratives than Loki, which has started off a lot of great story beats, but really in episode 6 surrendered everything to setting up what was going to come next on TV and in the movies. And I know what a lot of you are saying, well, dummy, what did you expect? This is an MCU TV show, and I understand that. I understand that these are all pieces of a puzzle, but at the same time, I felt like this was more open-ended than it should have been. I felt like you could have given us a little bit of closure on some of these moments, or at least not just left every single thing on a big to be continued, that maybe you could have made this a little bit more of a rewarding journey in and of itself. Now, that doesn't mean that it was a bad journey. I still think it was a very fun journey, a very interesting journey. And again, when we go out into the broader context, maybe in 2 or 3 years, when I see all the puzzle pieces in season 2 of Loki and all the other movies, I can look at it in a bigger context and say like, oh, okay, well, overall for a 4-year ride, I liked how the story did. But I can only judge stories piece by piece. I can only judge them as I'm watching them. And I do feel like this was set up in really satisfying ways for the first 5 episodes to really just be next up on Marvel in Loki episode 6. So overall, looking at season 1 of Loki, I will always remember the good times. And part of me, I'm glad that they're doing these weekly releases, because part of the good times of Loki have been the fact that I liked the first 5 episodes and I got to sit with each one of those episodes for an entire week and digest them and talk about the moments that I loved with my friends and see all the memes on Twitter. If it had been different, and if the first 5 episodes and the 6th had all come out on the same day, then I feel like I actually might like the show a little bit less, because I wouldn't have had that time to enjoy those things that I loved and go back and rewatch the episode a second time. So I have general overall positive feelings about the first season of Loki. And I always say that you can't rate something based on what you expected or what you hoped for, but I still think that I have to react naturally and just say that I did want and hope for a little bit more of a complete story. But we will see. Perhaps all of this will be changed and fixed and addressed in the new movies. Perhaps all of the stuff that we'll set up, I'll go back and say, well, you know what? Yes, it ended in setup, but all that payoff was worth it. And hey, we had 5 episodes of great TV before that, and nothing changes those 5 episodes of great TV, by the way. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Loki. Mixed feelings. It's weird when I like something, it seems like the people that I hear from are the ones that didn't like it, and I'm sure because I wasn't quite as high on this episode, I'll be hearing from the people that did like it. That's totally fine. If you loved this episode, I'm happy that you loved this episode. If you didn't like this episode, that's a perfectly valid feeling as well. This is all about conversation. This is all about sharing art. This is all about sharing discussion, speculation, etc. Let's not get angry at each other. And really, ultimately, this is just a comic book TV show. Please debate and discuss responsibly down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. If you want to see even more of what I'm doing, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And stay tuned here on the channel. We've got movie reviews, we've got charts, we've got other stuff, my podcast, All My Movies, which is also going to drop this week. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time when the next MCU show hits, but I'm looking forward to at least a few more weeks of not having to be a vampire once a week. I'm going to have a consistent sleep schedule for a few weeks, at least until the next show comes out. So I'm going to go enjoy having a consistent sleep pattern for at least a few more weeks. Thank you so much for watching, and oh my God, Miss Minutes. Why? Stay safe. I'll see you next time.